The Wyoming night was black as sin, and the air tasted of smoke and fear. Flames clawed at the sky, ripping through the roof of my barn, painting the fresh snow in 6 shades of orange and red. I gripped my Winchester, the cold steel a poor comfort against the heat licking at my face. My breath came out in ragged clouds, each one a ghost in the frigid air. I was waiting for the devil, and I knew his name was Cyrus Vance. But I wasn't alone. Beside me, a woman I'd called my wife for 3 weeks stood firm, the lantern in her hand not trembling once. Abigail Flynn, my bride by duty, not by love. A promise I'd made to a dying friend. She was supposed to be a school teacher from Boston. Prim, proper, afraid of her own shadow. But the woman standing next to me, her eyes gleaming like chips of emerald in the firelight, was no timid mouse. She leaned in close, her whisper cutting through the roar of the fire and the panicked cries of the cattle. "They want us to split up," she said, her voice impossibly calm. "One to the fire, one to the herd. We'll trick them with the light." I stared at her, a school teacher from Boston, ready to choreograph a gunfight in the dark. My heart hammered against my ribs. But for the first time that night, it wasn't from fear. It was from her, and I had to wonder, who in the hell had I actually married? It all started with a promise. Just a month earlier, I was standing outside Murphy's General Store in Cedar Ridge, the Wyoming dust thick on my boots. The sun was setting, bleeding gold and purple across the plains. In my pocket, I could feel the crinkle of Tom Brennan's will. His last words were a brand on my soul. "Marry her, Eli. Take care of Abigail." Tom had gasped it out, the rattlesnake venom already turning his blood to fire. He'd been my best friend, my brother in all but blood. He'd saved my life 5 years back, and I owed him a debt I could never repay. So I'd given my word, a foolish, binding promise that chafed worse than a saddle sore. At 32, I was the best ranch foreman in 3 counties. I knew cattle, horses, and the cruel moods of a Wyoming winter. But love, marriage, that was a trap, a weakness. I'd watched it destroy my own family when my sister Mary died screaming in childbirth, her husband a broken man beside her. I'd sworn off that life. I'd built walls around my heart so high and thick, no woman could ever breach them. Yet there I was, waiting for the stagecoach, waiting for a woman I'd never met, a woman I was about to chain myself to for the rest of my days. The coach groaned into view, a tired beast kicking up clouds of red dust. I set my jaw, steeling myself. I pictured a desperate spinster, her face worn with hardship, clinging to this last chance for security. The door swung open, and Abigail Flynn stepped down. The woman who appeared was no wilting flower. She was a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. Her dress was dark green, the color of a forest shadow, and it fit a frame that moved with a quiet, dangerous grace. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, pinned up tight, but you could see the fire in it. And her eyes, they were green as new spring grass, and they swept over the dusty street with an intelligence that missed nothing. This wasn't a woman running from her past. This was a woman marching toward her future, and that scared me more than any venomous snake. "Mr. Tucker?" Her voice was clear and steady, with just a hint of an Irish lilt that was both soft and sharp, like moss on a blade. "I'm Abigail Flynn. I believe you were expecting me." I managed to tip my hat, my throat suddenly as dry as the dirt beneath my boots. "Ma'am, my condolences for your loss. Tom, he spoke of you often." It was a lie, a bald-faced lie. In all our years together, Tom had barely mentioned her name, but the truth felt too brutal to speak out loud. Her gaze didn't waver. It was like she was looking right through me, weighing my soul. "Thank you. I understand there has been a change in our arrangement." I nodded, the words sticking in my throat. "Tom asked me to honor his commitment. The preacher is waiting if you're willing." Her gloved hand tightened on the small bag she carried. For just a second, I saw a crack in her perfect composure. "And if I am not willing, Mr. Tucker?" The question threw me. I hadn't even considered she'd have a choice. "Then you're on the morning coach to Cheyenne. I'll pay your fare to wherever you want to go. You'll be taken care of." She studied my face, her green eyes narrowing slightly. It was a look of intense calculation. Before I decide, I need to know why. Why would a man like you agree to this? You don't strike me as the sort who lacks for prospects. A few of the townsfolk were lingering, their ears wide open. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I lowered my voice. Tom Brennan saved my life 5 years ago in a Apache raid. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for him. A debt is a debt. Her lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. And what does this arrangement mean to you? A wife in name only? A housekeeper? The directness of it was like a slap. It means you'll have a home. You'll be safe. It's what Tom wanted for you, I said, my voice low and rough. Nothing more, unless you decide otherwise. She gave a quick, sharp nod, her gaze flickering to the onlookers before returning to me. Then we should speak privately. Inside the back room of Murphy's store, surrounded by the smell of coffee beans and tanned leather, she finally sat down. But her posture was rigid, straight as a fence post. Speak plainly, Mr. Tucker, she said, removing her gloves with slow, deliberate movements. You are marrying me out of duty. You have no desire for a wife. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. That's right, I admitted, setting my hat on a nearby barrel. I don't break my promises. Good, she said, and a flicker of something I couldn't name crossed her face. Relief? Respect? I respect a man who keeps his word, because I did not come here for love either. She paused, her fingers smoothing the fabric of her dress. I was a school teacher in Boston. My father, he made some poor investments. His debts ruined our family name. When the school board found out, they deemed me unfit to teach children. A woman touched by scandal, you see. Her story was simple, believable, but something about it felt rehearsed. Tom's offer was a lifeline, she continued. A chance at a new life, a place where I could be respected again, perhaps even teach again. She finally looked up, and her eyes were hard. But I will not be your property, Mr. Tucker. I require independence, and I require your respect. I found myself nodding before I'd even thought about it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Tom said you were smart. The ranch could use a smart mind. Another lie. Tom had said she was beautiful. He'd never said a word about her being smart. She stood and walked to the small, dusty window, looking out at the street. The light caught the curve of her waist, the line of her neck. My gut tightened. This was a mistake. A terrible, complicated mistake. Then we have an understanding, she said, turning back to me. Shall we see the preacher? I nodded, my mind reeling. As we stepped out of the store and into the fading sunlight, a shadow fell across our path. It was Cyrus Vance. He was a tall, lean man with eyes like a coyote, always watching, always hungry. He ran a land acquisition company for the railroad, which was a polite way of saying he was a vulture who picked the bones of honest ranchers. He tipped his hat, but it was a mockery, not a courtesy. Well, Tucker, heard you were getting hitched. Don't let a pretty new wife distract you from business. His eyes slid over to Abigail, a greasy, possessive look that made my hand twitch towards the Colt on my hip. That land of Tom Brennan's, Vance went on, his voice a low drawl. It's got a river running through it. The railroad would pay a fine price for that access. It's not for sale, Vance, I said, my voice flat and cold. He just smirked, a nasty little twist of his lips. Everything's for sale, sooner or later. His gaze lingered on Abigail one last time, a look that was both a threat and a promise. Then he turned and walked away. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Vance wasn't making an offer. He was making a threat. And as I stood there, with this strange, fiery woman beside me who was now legally my wife, I realized my promise to Tom wasn't just about protecting her from loneliness. I had to protect her from him. The problem was, as I looked at Abigail Flynn, with her secrets and her sharp green eyes, I had a sinking feeling that the person who really needed protecting was me. The first 3 weeks of our marriage were a strange and silent dance. We lived under the same roof, ate at the same table, but we were two strangers orbiting each other, separated by a gulf of unspoken words. The Tucker Ranch was a lonely place, and Abigail's presence filled the silence in ways that both soothed and unsettled me. She wasn't the burden I'd feared, far from it. She threw herself into the work with a ferocity that stunned me. She planted a garden, organized the pantry, and even convinced the handful of families in the area to let her start a small schoolhouse in an abandoned shed. She worked from sunup to sundown, her hands once soft and gloved, becoming calloused and capable. But it was the little things that got to me. The way she'd tuck a stray strand of that fiery auburn hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought. The scent of lavender and soap that clung to her. The low, quiet hum of a song she'd sing while baking bread in the kitchen. Each small detail was a crack in the fortress I'd built around my heart. One evening, I was on the porch mending a bridle, the leather cool and smooth beneath my fingers. Through the kitchen window, I could see her. She was washing the supper dishes, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. The lamplight traced the curve of her forearms, the line of her back. She bent to put a dish away, and the simple blue wool of her dress pulled taut across her hips. My hands stilled. My breath caught in my chest. I had sworn to myself this would be a marriage of convenience, a promise kept, a duty fulfilled, nothing more. But the man watching his wife through the window didn't feel dutiful. He felt a raw, aching hunger he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a decade. I stood up and walked to the kitchen door, drawn by an invisible string. The air was cool, but the space around her felt warm, charged with electricity. She must have sensed me, because she turned, her hands still damp. Her green eyes met mine, and in their depths I saw a flicker of the same restless fire that was burning in my own gut. "Supper was good," I managed to say, my voice sounding rough and unfamiliar to my own ears. A small smile touched her lips. A genuine smile, not the polite, distant one she usually wore. "I'm learning. Ranch life is a far cry from Boston." Her fingers toyed with the tie of her apron, pulling the fabric tight at her waist. My gaze followed the movement, and my throat went dry. I needed to get out of there. I needed to put some space between us before I did something I'd regret. I crossed the small room to get a mug for water, my arm brushing against hers as I reached for the shelf. The touch was electric. It was like a brand, searing my skin. Abigail froze. Her breath hitched. The only sound in the room was the crackle of the fire in the hearth. We were standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from her skin, see the rapid pulse beating at the base of her throat. Slowly, as if in a trance, my hand came up. I grazed her cheek with the back of my knuckles, my calloused skin rough against her softness. Her eyes fluttered shut. My hand slid to the nape of her neck, my fingers tangling in the soft hair there. I felt a thin chain, and my thumb brushed against a small, worn gold ring she wore as a pendant. Her breath came out in a shaky sigh. Her lips parted slightly. This was it, the point of no return. I could close the distance between us. I could kiss her. I could claim the wife I had never wanted but now found myself desperate for. But as I leaned in, the firelight caught the little ring on her necklace, and it glinted, and my blood ran ice cold. It was identical to the one my sister Mary had worn, the simple gold band her husband had given her, the ring she was still wearing when they lowered her into the cold Wyoming earth. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Mary's face pale and lifeless, the sound of her husband's broken sobs, the crushing, suffocating weight of loss. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. Abigail's eyes flew open, confusion and hurt warring in their green depths. "Eli, what is it?" Before I could answer, a shout ripped through the night from the direction of the corral. It was Miguel, my most trusted ranch hand, his voice raw with panic. "Boss, the fence is down! The cattle are loose!" The moment was shattered. The spell was broken. I grabbed my rifle from its rack by the door, the familiar weight a cold comfort. Danger I could handle. This confusing, terrifying feeling for my wife? I had no idea what to do with it. As I rushed out into the darkness, Abigail's hand shot out and grabbed my arm. Her touch was no longer soft and questioning. It was firm, resolute. "I'm coming with you," she said. We ran out into the chaotic night. Cattle were stampeding, their bellows of fear echoing in the darkness. But beyond the broken fence, I saw them. Shadows. darting between the trees. Men. It was Vance. He wasn't just trying to scatter my herd. This was something else. Something more brutal. And as Abigail and I ran towards the chaos, I realized the memory of my sister wasn't the only thing that had stopped me in that kitchen. It was the ring. Tom had never mentioned Abigail's mother. He'd never mentioned a ring. So where did she get it? And why was it the exact same design as the one that had been buried with my sister? The night exploded into violence. The snowstorm had passed, but the cold was a physical thing, a beast with biting teeth. The air was filled with the thunder of hooves and the panicked bellows of cattle. "Stay low!" I yelled to Abigail, pulling her down behind a stack of hay bales. Her lantern cast a wild, dancing light, making the shadows twist and leap like demons. She crouched beside me, her breathing quick but even. There was no fear in her eyes, only a sharp, calculating focus. "They cut the east fence," I hissed, peering around the edge of the bales. "They're trying to drive the herd into the canyons. We'll never get them back before the wolves do." "Then we use the light," she said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the noise. "We can use the lantern to turn them back toward the barn." Her mind was incredible, sharp as a razor. In the middle of chaos, she saw a solution. I nodded, a swell of fierce pride rising in my chest. She wasn't just my wife. She was my partner. We moved in sync, a team forged in fire and darkness. I provided cover with the Winchester while she used the lantern, its swinging arc of light like a shepherd's crook, guiding the terrified animals. My ranch hands, Miguel and young Pete Murphy, joined us, their faces grim. We were pushing them back. We were winning. And then I smelled it. Smoke. Not the clean scent of wood smoke from a chimney. This was the acrid, greasy smell of a building on fire. "Fire!" Pete screamed, his voice cracking. He pointed towards the barn. Flames were licking up the dry timber walls, hungry and fast. Vance's men weren't just thieves. They were arsonists. They wanted to burn me out, to leave me with nothing but ashes. My blood turned to ice. I'd seen fire take everything before. When I was just a boy, a prairie fire had destroyed a neighbor's homestead, trapping them inside. The memory of the flames, the screams, it was a nightmare I'd never escaped. "Miguel, get the hands on a bucket line." "Pete, ride for the sheriff." I barked out orders, my voice tight. "Abigail, get to the house. Lock the doors." "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice as hard as iron. She set the lantern down, grabbed an empty bucket, and ran to the water trough. The firelight caught in her hair, making it look like a crown of flames. She didn't argue. She didn't hesitate. She just acted. We worked side by side, a desperate, sweating line of people against a raging inferno. The heat was blistering, the smoke thick and choking. Abigail was right there with me, her face smudged with soot, her hands raw, but she never faltered. Then I saw him, a man near the back of the barn, holding another torch. He was about to set fire to the stables, where the horses were trapped, screaming in terror. I raised my rifle, taking aim, but Abigail's hand closed over the barrel, pushing it down. "Wait," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear. "Don't shoot. You'll give away our position. Use the light. Trick him." She pointed to the lantern she'd set on a post. An idea sparked in my mind. A crazy, brilliant idea. I grabbed the lantern and another bucket. I ran towards the side of the barn, staying in the shadows. I held the lantern high, then swung the bucket, casting a huge, man-shaped shadow against the wall. I did it again, from a different angle. And again. To the man with the torch, it must have looked like a dozen men were closing in on him from all sides. He hesitated, his eyes wide. Then he dropped the torch and bolted into the darkness. It worked. Abigail's plan had worked. By the time the sun began to rise, the fire was out. The barn was a charred, smoking skeleton. Half the herd was scattered. We were bruised, exhausted, and financially ruined. Rebuilding would take every penny I had and then some. As we stood there in the cold, gray dawn, surveying the wreckage, Abigail came to stand beside me. Her dress was torn and stained. Her face was pale with fatigue, but her eyes were clear and fierce. "He wants to break you, Eli," she said softly. "We can't let him." She looked at me, her gaze intense. "The Morrison land. The plot that borders our north pasture. If we could buy it, we could expand the herd, breed horses for the cavalry. It's a risk, but Mr. Morrison is the head of the school board. He respects me. I think I can convince him to help us get a loan from the bank. It was a bold plan, a reckless plan. It would mean mortgaging the entire ranch, everything Tom had left me. If it failed, we would lose it all. We would be left with nothing. But as I looked at her, at the unwavering belief in her eyes, belief in the ranch, belief in me, I felt a flicker of hope. With her, maybe it was possible. Maybe we could fight back. Just then, Miguel walked over, his face grim. He was holding something in his hand, a small, scorched leather pouch. "Found this in the loft, boss," he said, his voice quiet. It was tucked under a floorboard. The fire must have exposed it. He handed the pouch to me. It was surprisingly heavy. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a stack of letters, and a single heavy gold coin I didn't recognize. But it was the letter on top that made my heart stop. It was sealed with wax, and it was addressed to Abigail, in Tom Brennan's handwriting. My mind reeled. Tom had been dead for over a month. He had been on my ranch for 2 days before the snake bite. When could he have possibly hidden this here? And why? I looked from the letter to Abigail. Her face was a mask. She showed no surprise, no recognition, but her eyes. Her eyes darted to the pouch with an unnerving stillness. It was the look of someone who had been waiting for something. And I suddenly had the terrible feeling that the fire wasn't just a random act of violence from Cyrus Vance. Someone was looking for this pouch, and they were willing to burn my entire world to the ground to find it. The morning air was sharp and thin, carrying the bitter scent of charred wood. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us as heavy as a shroud. The scorched leather pouch lay on the table, a dark stain on the clean pine. I pushed the sealed letter across the table towards Abigail. Her name was written on it in Tom's familiar scrawl. "He was only here for 2 days before he died," I said, my voice low and flat. "When did he write this? Why did he hide it?" Abigail didn't look at me. She stared at the letter as if it were a coiled snake. Her hands were trembling slightly. The calm, unshakable woman who had faced down fire. And Raiders was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize. Someone afraid. I don't know," she whispered. "Don't lie to me, Abigail," I said, the words harder than I intended. "Vance didn't set that fire just to scatter cattle. He was looking for something. Was it this?" She finally looked up, and her green eyes were filled with a desperate plea. "I swear to you, Eli, I didn't know about any letters. I didn't know he would hide anything." But her words felt hollow. There was a secret here, a deep and dangerous one, and she was at the center of it. With unsteady fingers, she broke the wax seal. She unfolded the paper and began to read. I watched her face, trying to decipher the emotions that flickered across it. Shock, confusion, and then dawning horror. Her face went pale as milk. Her hand flew to her mouth, and a small choked gasp escaped her lips. "What is it?" I demanded, my patience gone. "What does it say?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the paper, her eyes wide with terror. I reached across the table and snatched the letter from her grasp. Her head snapped up. "Eli, no, don't!" But it was too late. I was already reading. The letter wasn't a confession of love. It wasn't a plea for her happiness. It was a confession of murder. "Abigail," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am dead. And I did not die by accident. Cyrus Vance will have killed me. We had a deal, you see, a partnership. But I could not go through with it. I could not do to Eli what was done to your father." My blood ran cold. Her father? The Boston School Board? The debts? Was any of it true? I kept reading, my heart pounding in my ears. "The map is the key. The coin is the proof. He is looking for what your father found, the evidence that can destroy him. He thinks it's on this ranch. I was supposed to help him find it. I was supposed to get close to Eli, gain his trust and betray him. But I couldn't. Eli is a good man. He doesn't deserve this. I have hidden the real map. Do not trust the one I gave you. He will be watching you. Run. Take this warning and disappear." I looked up from the letter. My mind a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. A map? What map? The one he gave her? My eyes fell on the small reticule she always carried, the one she'd been clutching when she first stepped off the stagecoach. Before I could even speak, she knew. Her eyes widened in panic. She lunged for the bag, but I was faster. I grabbed it, ripped it open, and dumped the contents onto the table. A handkerchief, a small bottle of lavender water, a book of poetry, and a folded piece of parchment, a hand-drawn map. I unfolded it. It was a crude but detailed map of my own ranch. The pastures, the river, the barn. Everything was there. But in the northern pasture, near the Morrison property she had been so eager to buy, was a small red X. I looked from the map to her face. The woman I had married, the woman I had started to feel something for, was a liar, a spy. She had come here under false pretenses, working with the very man who wanted to destroy me, the man who had murdered my best friend. You knew, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. All of it. A lie. No, she cried, tears finally streaming down her face. Not all of it. My father was ruined by Vance, that part is true. He found proof that Vance's entire railroad fortune was built on stolen claims and murder. Vance had him killed, made it look like an accident. I came west for justice, for revenge. Tom, Tom was supposed to help me. By marrying you? By using my ranch as your own personal treasure map? I shot back, the betrayal a raw, open wound. He said it was the only way, she sobbed. To get close, to find the evidence my father hid before he died. I never meant for you to get hurt. Suddenly it all clicked into place. Her strange calm during the fire, her brilliant idea to use the light, her intimate knowledge of strategy and deception. She wasn't a school teacher. She was a hunter, and I was just a pawn in her game. And the ring. My God, the ring. The ring, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Where did you get it? She flinched. It was my mother's. Liar, I roared, slamming my fist on the table. My sister had a ring just like it, an uncommon design from a jeweler in St. Louis. Where did you get it, Abigail? Her composure finally broke completely. Tom gave it to me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He said it would make me look respectable. He said it belonged to a woman he once knew. A cold, sickening dread washed over me. Tom and my sister Mary had been close once, years ago, before she met her husband. Could it be? No, it was impossible. But as I stared at the woman across from me, a woman whose entire identity was a carefully constructed lie, I realized that nothing was impossible. I felt a sudden primal urge to protect myself, to protect my home. I grabbed the map from the table. This is over. You're leaving. On the morning coach. Eli, you don't understand, she pleaded, grabbing for my arm. Vance won't stop. He'll kill you to get what he's looking for. We have to find it first. I shook her off, my heart a block of ice. There is no we. There is only me. And a liar who I was foolish enough to marry. I turned and strode out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I needed air. I needed to think. I walked towards the river, the crumpled map clutched in my fist. The world had tilted on its axis. My best friend was a murderer's accomplice. My wife was a spy sent to betray me. The ground I was standing on, the land I had worked and bled for, was nothing but a hiding place in a deadly game. I stood by the river's edge, the cold water rushing over the stones, and I looked at the map in my hand. Tom's letter had said not to trust it, that he had hidden the real map. But where? My eyes scanned the familiar landscape. Then I looked down at the pouch still in my other hand. I'd forgotten about it. I opened it again. The letters from Tom, the strange gold coin. I picked up the coin. It was heavy, unfamiliar. One side had the profile of a Roman emperor. The other side was worn almost smooth. But as I tilted it in the morning light, I saw it. Faint, tiny scratches etched into the surface. They weren't random marks. They were lines, coordinates, a second map hidden in plain sight. And the location it pointed to wasn't the northern pasture. It was a small, overlooked cave system hidden behind the waterfall at the far edge of my property, a place I hadn't been to in years, a place Tom Brennan had loved to explore. A wave of dizziness hit me. This was it, the real location. But as I stood there, a plan forming in my mind, a cold realization washed over me. If Tom had given Abigail a fake map, it was for one reason, to mislead Vance, which meant Vance and his men were probably at that very moment heading towards the X in the northern pasture. The same pasture that bordered the Morrison land. The same land Abigail had been so desperate for us to buy. Was that part of the plan too? To get me to overextend myself? To buy a piece of land that would become the center of a bloody fight? Was her brilliant business plan just another layer of her deception? I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know what was real. But I knew one thing for sure. Vance was on my land, looking for something that could get us all killed. And the only person who might know the full truth was the woman back in my house. The woman I now hated as much as I had started to love. I stormed back into the house, my mind a cold, clear engine of purpose. Anger was a fuel, and right now I was burning with it. Abigail was standing by the window, her back to me, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She didn't turn when I entered. "You're a better liar than I thought," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "The Morrison land. Your plan to buy it. Was that part of the deception too? To make sure I was focused on the wrong part of the ranch while Vance dug up the northern pasture?" She turned slowly, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes were defiant. "No, that was real. I saw a chance for us to build something, a way to fight back. I wanted it to be real, Eli." "Nothing about you is real," I shot back, tossing the heavy gold coin onto the table between us. It landed with a dull thud. "Tom left a second map, hidden on this." Her eyes widened as she looked at the coin, a flicker of genuine surprise on her face. She stepped closer, peering at the tiny scratches. "Where?" "A cave behind the waterfall," I said. "He knew Vance would be watching you. He gave you a decoy to keep them busy." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "So here's what's going to happen. You are going to tell me everything, every detail your father discovered, everything you and Tom planned, everything you know about Cyrus Vance, and you're going to do it now." For the next hour she talked, and the story she told was a nightmare of corporate greed and ruthless violence. Her father, a geologist, had been hired by Vance's railroad predecessor to survey land in the West. He'd stumbled upon proof of a massive conspiracy. Vance and his partners were using fraudulent claims, intimidation, and even murder to steal mineral-rich land from homesteaders, then selling it to the government at an inflated price for the railroad expansion. Her father had gathered a ledger and sworn affidavits, a treasure trove of evidence that could bring Vance's entire empire crashing down. Before he could expose them, he was killed in a staged carriage accident. The evidence vanished. Abigail, left with nothing but her father's notes and a thirst for vengeance, had spent years tracking the conspiracy. Her search led her to Tom Brennan, who had once worked as a hired gun for Vance's associates. She'd approached him, hoping he could be turned. "He was consumed by guilt," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Guilt over the things he'd done for them, especially the Apache raid." My head snapped up. "What about the raid?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "It wasn't a real raid, Eli. It was Vance's men, disguised as Apaches. The family they attacked. The husband was one of the men who signed an affidavit against Vance. They were sent to silence him and retrieve his copy of the evidence. Tom was with them. He said he didn't know they were going to kill the whole family." A cold, sickening dread seeped into my bones. That was the raid where Tom had saved me. I had been riding nearby, heard the shots, and stumbled into the massacre. One of the disguised men had turned his gun on me, but Tom had shot him first. He hadn't saved me from Apaches. He had saved me from his own partners. The debt I thought I owed him was a lie built on a foundation of murder. "He saved you, and it broke him," Abigail continued. "It was the last line he crossed. After that, he agreed to help me. His plan was to get the job as your foreman, use his knowledge of the land to find the spot where my father hid the original ledger, and expose Vance. Marrying me, that was his idea to get me on the ranch safely, under Vance's nose, after he'd secured the location." But Vance got to him first, I finished, the pieces clicking into place. He must have suspected Tom had turned. He killed him, and now he's trying to find the ledger himself. We were silent for a moment, the terrible truth settling over the room. My entire world had been reshaped in the span of a few hours. Vance is in the North Pasture now, chasing a ghost, I said, my mind racing. That gives us a head start. We're going to the caves. Abigail looked at me, her eyes wide. We? You know what this evidence looks like. You know the details of the case. I need you, I said, the words tasting like gravel. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. When this is over, you will get on that stagecoach and you will disappear from my life. Understood? She nodded, a fresh wave of pain in her eyes. Understood. We rode out not as husband and wife, but as two soldiers in a temporary, desperate alliance. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening more snow. The air was electric with unspoken tension. I couldn't look at her without feeling the sting of betrayal, but I also couldn't ignore the raw courage that radiated from her. She was riding into the lion's den, not for money, but for justice, for her father. The waterfall was a magnificent sight, a curtain of roaring white water crashing down into a deep emerald pool. The entrance to the cave was hidden behind it, a dark, narrow slit in the rock face, slick with moss and mist. We dismounted, tying the horses in a thicket of pines. Stay behind me, I ordered, pulling my colt. And be quiet. We slipped through the curtain of water, the icy spray soaking us in seconds. The air inside the cave was damp and cold, smelling of wet stone and ancient earth. It was pitch black. I struck a match, the tiny flame pushing back the oppressive darkness. I lit the lantern Abigail carried, and the cave came to life around us. It was larger than I remembered, a network of winding passages and chambers. My father's notes said to look for a rock formation that looks like a serpent's head, Abigail whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. We moved deeper into the earth, our lantern casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Every drip of water sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind through the passages sounded like a whisper. After nearly an hour of searching, we found it. In a small side chamber, a stalagmite had formed over centuries into a shape that uncannily resembled a striking snake. This is it, Abigail breathed. At the base of the rock serpent, a collection of loose stones looked out of place. I knelt down, handing the lantern to Abigail, and started pulling them away. Behind them was a hollowed-out space, and inside that space was a heavy oilcloth-wrapped parcel. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the evidence, the key to destroying Cyrus Vance. I reached in and pulled it out. It was heavy, solid, a thick leather-bound ledger. As I stood up, a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. We had it. We had won. I turned to Abigail, a triumphant smile on my face. But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring past me, towards the mouth of the cave. Her face was a mask of pure terror. And then I heard the sound that turned my blood to ice, the slow, deliberate click of a rifle hammer being pulled back. Well now, a familiar, chilling voice drawled from the darkness. Isn't this a cozy little reunion? I do appreciate you two doing all the hard work for me. Cyrus Vance stepped out of the shadows, a smug, predatory grin on his face. And he wasn't alone. Two of his hired guns flanked him, their rifles leveled directly at our hearts. My mind raced. How? How did he know? The fake map? The decoy? It was all for nothing. Vance seemed to read my thoughts. He chuckled, a low, ugly sound. Your friend Tom was clever. I'll give him that. The fake map was a nice touch, but he wasn't clever enough. He took a step closer, his coyote eyes gleaming in the lantern light. You see, Tucker, I wasn't just watching the girl, he sneered. I've had someone on the inside from the very beginning. Someone keeping a close eye on both of you. He gestured with his rifle towards the entrance of the cave. Another figure stepped out of the darkness and into the light. My stomach dropped. I felt the world tilt, the ground giving way beneath me. It was Miguel, my most trusted ranch hand. my friend. His face was grim, his eyes filled with a weary resignation, and in his hand he held a pistol, pointed right at me. "I'm sorry, boss," he said, his voice heavy with a regret that did nothing to soften the blow of his betrayal. "He has my family." The betrayal was a physical shock, so profound it left me breathless. Miguel, the man who had fought beside me, who had worked this ranch with me for years. He had been a spy for Vance all along. Vance let out a cruel laugh. "Every man has his price, Tucker, or his weakness. Now be a good boy and hand over that ledger." My mind was a maelstrom, trapped, outgunned, betrayed by my own man. It was over. But then I looked at Abigail. The terror on her face had been replaced by something else. A cold, hard fury. The same fire I'd seen the night of the attack. She wasn't defeated, not yet. Her eyes flickered from Vance to the ledger in my hands, then back to me. A silent message passed between us. We had come this far. We couldn't give up now. I clutched the ledger tighter. "You'll have to kill me first, Vance." Vance's smirk widened. "That can be arranged, but I'd prefer to kill her first. A little motivation for you." He nodded to one of his men, who grabbed Abigail, shoving the barrel of his rifle hard against her temple. She cried out, a small gasp of pain and fear. That was it, the breaking point. The sight of his man handling her, the fear in her eyes. It lit a fuse in me. My carefully controlled anger exploded into pure, white-hot rage. "Let her go," I growled, my voice a low, dangerous rumble. "The ledger," Vance repeated, his voice silky smooth, "and I'll let her live." Maybe. It was a standoff, a deadly impasse. My life, her life, for the book in my hands. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about a promise to Tom anymore. It wasn't about duty or honor. It was about the woman standing there, a gun to her head, the liar, the spy, the woman who had turned my world upside down, and the only woman I had ever truly loved. I had to make a choice, justice for a dead man, or a future for a living woman. I began to lower the ledger, a gesture of surrender. Vance's eyes gleamed with triumph. His men relaxed just slightly. It was the opening I needed. "Now, Abigail," I roared. In the same instant, I threw the heavy ledger, not at Vance, but at the lantern he was holding. And Abigail, bless her sharp mind and fierce heart, didn't hesitate. She stomped down hard on the gunman's instep with the heel of her boot and drove her elbow back into his ribs with all her strength. The world erupted into chaos. The ledger smashed into the lantern, shattering the glass and plunging the cave into absolute disorienting darkness. The gunman holding Abigail grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a critical second. The last thing I saw before the light died was Abigail wrenching herself free. A rifle shot exploded in the confined space, the sound deafening, the muzzle flash a blinding white star that burned itself onto my vision. I didn't wait. I dove to the side, rolling behind a cluster of stalagmites as another shot ripped through the air where I had been standing. I drew my Colt, my ears ringing, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Light a match," Vance bellowed, his voice filled with fury. "Find them." Another muzzle flash illuminated the cave for a split second, this time from my right. It wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at Vance's men. Miguel. The flash revealed his face, twisted in conflict. He wasn't shooting to kill, but to confuse. His betrayal wasn't what it seemed. He was playing a deeper game. A match scraped against stone, and a tiny flame sputtered to life, held in the trembling hand of one of Vance's thugs. In that small circle of light, I saw Abigail. She hadn't run. She had armed herself with a heavy, jagged rock. She was crouched like a cornered mountain cat, ready to fight. I didn't think. I aimed and fired. The match went out. The man screamed and dropped his rifle. Darkness swallowed us again. "Spread out!" Vance yelled, his voice laced with panic now. "They're in here somewhere." I could hear them moving, stumbling in the dark, their boots scraping on the wet stone. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. I was counting their shots, trying to keep track of their positions. A shape moved in the darkness near me. I raised my pistol, my finger tightening on the trigger. "Eli, it's me!" Abigail's voice whispered, so close it made me jump. She was right beside me. I could feel the warmth of her, smell the faint scent of lavender and damp earth. She pressed something cold and hard into my hand. The rock. Good girl, I whispered back. We were a team, not by choice but by necessity. Every ounce of betrayal and anger I felt towards her was gone, burned away by the fire of survival. All that mattered was getting out of this cave alive. Another shot echoed from deeper in the cave, followed by a cry of pain. Then another. Miguel was creating a diversion, drawing them away from us. He was buying us time. The ledger, Abigail whispered urgently. We have to get the ledger. She was right. Without it, this was all for nothing. Her father's death, Tom's death, they would be meaningless. I could just make out its dark shape on the cave floor, near where the lantern had been. It was in the open. A death trap. I'll draw their fire, I said, my decision made in a heartbeat. When I shoot, you run. Grab the book and get to the waterfall. Don't wait for me. Just go. No, she said, her voice fierce, her hand gripping my arm tight. We do this together. Before I could argue, she leaned in and pressed her lips to mine. It wasn't a soft, hesitant kiss. It was desperate and fierce and raw. It was a promise and a prayer and a goodbye all at once. It tasted of gunpowder and fear and a desperate, crazy hope. When she pulled back, the darkness between us seemed to hum with the force of it. Together, she repeated, and then, from the mouth of the cave, a new voice called out, Vance, Cyrus Vance, this is Sheriff Brody. We have the cave surrounded. Throw down your weapons and come out with your hands up. Pete Murphy, the young ranch hand I'd sent for help what felt like a lifetime ago. He'd made it. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Hope, bright and sharp, pierced through the darkness. But Vance was a cornered rat, and cornered rats are the most dangerous. It's a trick, Vance screamed, his voice unhinged. Kill them! Kill them all! The cave erupted in a final, desperate firefight. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like strobe lights, revealing chaotic snapshots of violence. Vance firing wildly, Miguel providing cover fire from a side passage. I saw my chance. Cover me, I yelled, and I sprinted out from behind the rocks, straight for the ledger. A bullet whizzed past my ear, so close I felt its heat. Another kicked up stone chips at my feet. I dove, sliding across the slick floor, my fingers closing around the leather-bound book. I had it. I rolled, bringing my Colt up, and saw Vance. He was standing over Abigail, his pistol aimed down at her. She had been crawling for the ledger, too. Time seemed to slow down. There was a loud bang, but it wasn't from my gun. Vance stiffened. A look of stunned surprise crossed his face. He looked down at the dark red stain blooming on his chest. He swayed on his feet, his gun falling from his hand with a clatter. Then he collapsed. Standing behind him, in the mouth of the cave, silhouetted by the torches of the sheriff's posse, was Miguel. His pistol was smoking. He hadn't been a traitor. He had been a prisoner, and he had just saved us all. The fight was over. As the sheriff and his men flooded into the cave, their lights chasing away the last of the shadows, I scrambled over to Abigail. I helped her to her feet, my hands shaking. Are you hurt? I asked, my voice hoarse. No, she said, her eyes locked on mine. Are you? I shook my head, unable to speak. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight, burying my face in her hair. She was safe. We were safe. We had the evidence. We had justice. But as I held her, the woman who was my wife, I knew that what we had found in that dark, cold cave was something far more precious. We had found each other. The aftermath was a blur of sheriff's questions and townspeople's gratitude. The ledger was exactly what Abigail had claimed. It was irrefutable proof of Vance's crimes, and it implicated some of the most powerful men in the territory. The conspiracy crumbled like a house of cards. Miguel explained how Vance had been blackmailing him, holding his family in Cheyenne hostage to ensure his cooperation. He had been feeding Vance false information for weeks, trying to buy time, waiting for a chance to do the right thing. He was a hero, not a traitor. In the days that followed, a quiet understanding settled between me and Abigail. The lies and betrayals were in the past, burned away by the shared trauma of the fight. What was left was a raw, undeniable truth. The promise I'd made to Tom had been fulfilled, but it no longer mattered. The contract we'd agreed to was void. We were no longer bound by duty, we were bound by something stronger. A week later, I found her down by the river, skipping stones across the water, the evening sun turning her hair to molten gold. I stood beside her, watching the ripples spread. "The morning coach leaves in an hour," I said quietly. She didn't look at me. She just picked up another flat stone, weighing it in her palm. "I know. I paid your fare," I continued, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest. "To anywhere you want to go. A new life. A fresh start. It's what we agreed." She was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to me, and her green eyes were clear and steady. "Is that what you want, Eli?" she asked softly. "For me to go?" I looked at her, this brilliant, fierce, incredible woman who had ridden into my life on a storm of lies and left me a better man than I was before. I thought of my ranch, of the quiet house, of the lonely years ahead if she left. The walls I had built around my heart had been utterly demolished. There was nothing left but rubble. "No," I said, the word coming out rough with emotion. "It's the last thing I want." A slow smile spread across her face, a real dazzling smile that lit up her whole being. "Good," she said, "because I was a school teacher in Boston, and I think it's high time Cedar Ridge had a proper one." She stepped closer, and this time, when she reached for my hand, there were no secrets between us. "I didn't come to Wyoming looking for love," she whispered, her fingers lacing with mine. "But I think, maybe, I found a home." I pulled her close, and as the Wyoming sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire and promise, I kissed my wife. Not out of duty, not out of desperation, but out of a love that had been forged in darkness, and now finally had found the light. The promise I made to a dead man had led me here, but the promise I was making to her, right now, was the one that would last a lifetime. Folks, if this story of a promise kept and a love found in the heart of the wild frontier got your blood pumping, do me a favor, hit that like button right down below. And I gotta ask, what was the biggest twist for you? Was it the truth about Tom, Abigail's real mission, or Miguel's final heroic act? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I read every single one. And if you want more tales of grit, guns, and the untamed heart of the West, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single story. A special thanks to our channel members for their support. It's because of you we can keep these stories coming. Until next time, stay safe and always watch your back. You never know who you can trust.